call to order this workshop for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, August 2nd, 2022, for the broadband feasibility study. And I suppose that, Andy, you are leading off, is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Mayor. So this is Andy Hines. He is with Finley Engineering. He's part of the consultant team. And then with him is also Doug Dawson with CCG. And Doug is unavailable to be here tonight, and he is available virtually. And so there's Mr. Dawson there. Mr. Dawson is going to give you the summary of the study. Andy is on the technical side, and they will be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Philip.
Doug, it's all yours.
Very good. Yeah, hi, I'm Doug Dawson. As he said, sorry I can't be there tonight, but I'm starting to slip towards 70 years old with some health issues, and my wife doesn't let me travel too much anymore. So, so if you want to pull up the slideshow, Andy, we'll just start running through it here. Interrupt us at any time to ask questions. We don't need to wait to the end if you want, or y'all can wait. It's really your call. It's your meeting. So the existing ISPs in the town today are CenturyLink, who's a telephone company. That company is going to turn into Brightspeed here any month now. So Brightspeed is an investment-backed firm that bought 20 states of CenturyLink product markets, and they will pop up later this year. Cox is the incumbent cable company. There's a company called Blue Pulse Networks who has fixed wireless, and they claim to serve the town. But we talked to almost 600 folks, and we didn't find anyone using them, but they probably have a few customers there. There are people who use satellites, and in fact, we found a couple people in town who have already gotten satellites from Starlink, and so that was interesting. There's also a new fixed cellular product from T-Mobile and Verizon that delivers about 100 megabits, and so that's sort of something that just popped up in the last year that people are starting to buy. So the study really had three goals. We did a feasibility study to see who in town, to see if it makes any sense to talk about bringing a fiber solution to town or a broadband solution. We actually considered wireless, and we couldn't find a wireless technology that made any sense. The study itself has three parts: market research. We did some surveys, we did interviews. We wanted to see how the public felt about broadband. Will they buy from a new network? Andy will talk about the engineering estimate he did that will estimate the cost of building fiber. And then I did a financial feasibility to see if it makes any sense to even do this. So the market outreach, we had a statistically valid telephone survey that we called 380 folks at their homes. My surveyor's been working with me for 20 years, and they said your folks were a pleasure to talk to. That's not always the case. But the folks in your town were really anxious to talk about broadband. So it was a really successful survey. We also had an online survey, and another 200 people gave us responses on their own. It turns out the two surveys had very nearly identical results. So that's always a good thing to find out. We had online speed tests. We interviewed key stakeholders and talked to businesses. We ended up talking to 33 businesses in town. So overall, we think we got a real feel for how the public feels about broadband. The reason we do these surveys, I always say that every single town is different, and I have to tell you that your survey was the most different survey we've had in a long time. 11% of folks don't have home broadband today. Cox has 83% of the market, which is 92% of everybody who has broadband. We've never seen a cable company have that percentage of the market before in a town of your size. So, CenturyLink really doesn't have hardly anybody there. That's, 92% is a huge number. We usually see more like between 70 and 80%. 30% of the homes still buy cable TV. That's pretty far below the national average, which last month hit 51%. Only 6% have landlines. That's also way below the national average, which is actually at about 25% now. So folks really pretty much buy broadband. 55% of the people we talk to have somebody working at home, at least part-time. That included 14% of all the homes say they are somebody who works at home full time now. Before the pandemic, we rarely saw more than 2 or 3% of folks working from home. So, I mean, this is obviously a very big change. And a lot of these folks told us they're going to continue to work at home. I mean, this is just the new way that people work. So that, and that's one of the reasons broadband is growing in importance. 20% of those folks told us that their broadband wasn't good enough to work from home. And that's an issue that, and I'll talk about it a bit later here, but it really relates to upload speeds. The download speeds in town are pretty good, but the upload speeds have some problems. 44% of the people we chatted with have school-age children, and 23% of them said the broadband was not good enough for their kids to do their homework from home. The average price paid for broadband is $85. That's the highest number we've ever seen as an average. It's not hard to understand that number because Cox is the most expensive cable company. And so, they run neck and neck with a company called Mediacom. So, so because everybody uses them and because they have the highest prices, normally we see average prices for broadband in a town go between $70 and $75. So 85 is $10 to $15 higher than anywhere else we've ever seen, including we've studied 5 or 6 other places in Arkansas in the last year. You're way above all of them. So 86% of the people we surveyed said they support somebody building a fiber network. 88% of people want lower prices, which is, again, that's an incredibly high number. And anytime you say, do you want better prices in any market, 30% of people just say yes. But anytime we see above 50%, that's really starting to feel like a major issue. Here, it's practically everybody, and that comes right back to the $85 average rate. So people really care about that. 77% want more competition, and I think that comes back to the very same reason. They want some other choice other than Cox. And so 63% of people said they would buy if somebody builds a fiber network. For a city, that's extraordinarily high. That's the kind of number we usually see in a rural area who doesn't even have broadband. Another 18% said they would probably buy. I mean, between those, that's almost everybody. And so that, that's just an extraordinary finding. Again, this survey overall was completely unexpected results. All these numbers are way out of bounds of what we normally see, and we've been doing surveys for 20 years. So we've got a whole lot of experience in doing them. I think last year we probably did 30 of these. So very unusual findings. Basically, prices are too high, and then there are certainly some complaints about upload speeds. Again, the businesses didn't have a whole lot of complaints. Most of the businesses were very happy with download speeds. Again, we talked to 33 of them. A few of them were very unhappy with upload speeds. And what that means, we heard stories like, I can't have more than 2 or 3 people make a Zoom call at the same time. We have to take turns doing it. I have some folks working at home and I can't connect to very many of them at the same time. So we didn't, that was the major problem with speeds. The biggest complaint was that we were told there were fairly regular outages. The outages go from anywhere from a few minutes to a half a day. And a lot of these businesses said when the internet goes out, they just stop working, that there's really not much they can do till it comes back. So they were pretty unhappy with that. The speed test, if you can see this map, and I think you have a paper copy, it may not show up all that great on the screen, but this is the average we took of all the speed tests in different parts of the city. And what you can see is, they do vary somewhat. And the first number is the download speed. The second number is the upload speeds. What you'll see is the download speeds in the northwest are 86 megabytes per second download. When you go down to the south, it's only 53. We don't really know why this is, but what this tells us, this makes us very highly suspect that different parts of town have different quality of the network. That's not unusual. These networks were built over time. The cable company networks were built in the 70s. They're getting to be 50 years old, and they're just getting to wear out. They're really getting to the end of their economic life. And so there could be parts of the town that just have some problems and never get solved. It's really hard to say. The other thing to notice is the upload speeds. They're all bad. The FCC has just recently recommended that we define broadband to be anybody that has 100 megabits down and 20 megabits up. And you can see these speeds are half that. I mean, the upload speeds in the town across the board don't even average 10 megabits per second. So, you know, that's the Cox network is not set up to do upload speeds. I mean, that's just not what they're set up to do. Another way to look at speed test, we were able to look at those, and we were able to look at those by what people subscribe to. And Cox has packages everywhere. Well, this actually from 25 megabits up to gigabit. And what you can see here is what percentage really people are getting of each of the speeds. And so, you know, gigabit, they're getting 600 megabits compared to 1,000. That's what a gigabit is, 1,000 megabits. You know, they're not bad, but nobody's getting on average the full speeds that they're subscribing to. But they're not terrible. We've seen cities with much bigger difference between the speeds you get and the speeds you subscribe to. The only people with decent upload speeds are the gigabit customers. Everybody else is a 10 or below. So on to Andy to talk about the network design here.
You bet. Thanks, Doug. So just a quick introduction. So Finley Engineering, we work with CCG Consulting on many of these types of broadband study projects. We also independently work for a variety of broadband operators across the United States, and that can be municipal utilities like Siloam Springs. That can be for legacy telecom operators in rural areas, electric cooperatives, private providers that are wireless ISPs that are now becoming fiber ISPs in rural areas, municipals, and just a wide variety of operators. So we see a broad spectrum of broadband across the United States. And I think as Doug or even maybe Philip said, you know, we've done several other of these studies and projects in Arkansas. So we're very familiar with landscape and some of the things here in the state. So when we do the network design, we worked with Philip and Glenn and everybody to gather your GIS data of your existing electric system. So we closely follow the path of those existing assets because we want to use pole lines where it makes sense because that is a much less expensive method of construction. You have a pretty significant amount of buried electrical here, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it does drive some of the cost up when we go to put buried fiber in compared to aerial. And I believe, if I remember right, we had about 56% aerial and 44% buried in this network when we were done with the overall design. So what we do is take all of your existing assets, the GIS data, and we create a high-level network design to estimate the cost of an actual operating functional network. So we go into some amount of detail to understand where the mainline cables are, where all the equipment's located, and then also the connections from a mainline cable to a customer's house, all the equipment associated with it. We take all that information from a complete design, create a cost estimate from it, and hand that off to Doug for the financial analysis. And Doug will go ahead and explain the operational side, what he adds on to that capital investment. The actual fiber plant is your biggest investment here. And fiber does have an extraordinarily long life. We as Finley have been putting fiber in the ground or in the air since the 80s. We've done a lot of it since the 90s, and all of that fiber is still operational today. Yes, there's operational expenses associated with that, but the glass, today that is put in is much better quality than was put in the 90s. So I'm not sure that we've even really seen the longest life yet of what some of these optical cables and optical glass can realistically do over time. And again, we've looked at 1 gig, now we're into 10 gig networks, 100 gig networks, and you're starting to see 400 gig and even terabyte style networks that are emerging. So we look at, as Doug mentioned, work from home, content creation, and both in the upload and download speeds. The beauty of the fiber network is it can run essentially an unlimited amount of data. It just really depends on the optics that you put on either end of that piece of glass. And then the routing piece and the fiber internet backbone on the back end of it. Doug already covered some of the definitions of broadband, so I don't want to cover that again. As Doug indicated in the RFP, we need to look at technology. we do always consider wireless, but based on terrain, topography, and some of the spectrum ownership required to really do robust broadband, it really didn't make sense here. So we really focused on fiber, again, because of the long life. In the last year, we've seen a transition to a technology that's called XGS-PON. That simply is a technology that has 10 gigabits of bandwidth in the optical laser components, and that is shared among 32 customers, dynamically assigned. At the end of the day, as technology and optics advance, we use the most prevalent and advanced technology today, and realistically that allows you to provide, near 1 gig to every customer real time. And again, there's some back end just usage that goes into kind of that understanding, and I'm not going to get into that. We'll talk to Philip and Glenn if we need to get into some gory technical details, but total of 95 fiber miles in construction, and again, as I indicated, 56% aerial and 44% buried, just based on your existing electrical assets. Couple key design considerations. As I said, we followed the utility path. Used active, or the ability to use both active and passive optics. Active is a 1-for-1, passive is a 1-to-multiple. Just that's the very high level basis of this, and the ability to mix and match based on use case. Talked about 10 gig a little bit already. We did use 2 of your existing sites. One is the substation in the northeast part of Siloam Springs. The other is your operations headquarters, to split all of the active optical components. And then we did use 2 of your existing fiber huts to put some more minor equipment in, just for some diversity. But most of the hardware sits in those 2 data centers because they are geographically diverse, more than 1 mile apart. Since we are near Joplin, where Lamar is, when you see a 1 mile wide tornado come through and completely destroy things, you try to get things as far apart as you can. If something as big as a 1 mile wide tornado ever appears, it's usually, pretty bad deal, and we want to keep separation of assets. We did factor in extra fiber provided for growth and expansion. That's both in areas where you have built out, and then fully recognizing that you do have areas of growth and putting extra fiber in those, because we don't know exactly what kind of houses, apartments, everything are going to be there. We did our best to estimate what that might look like. The beauty of fiber is if you have rapid expansion, we can always put more equipment in. And and there is no impairment to what you can do with the fiber optic network. Quick graphic of the passive optical network sites. These are passive sites where we split some of the one-to-many fiber signals. Again, this is a high-level design, probably fairly accurate, but not necessarily 100% representative of where these would be in a production network. That takes a whole nother level of detail to actually get to that. But for cost estimating purposes, we do have everything accounted for, and that's just kind of a spatial representation of what that high-level design looked like. The other thing in talking with Philip and everyone is the need for redundancy and resiliency, even on the utility side of things for the electric grid for communications purposes. So we did make multiple ring paths between some of the different assets in here, so that there are multiple paths of connectivity to cut down on any isolation should you have something happen where maybe a pole gets hit and a fiber goes down and it's cut, so that equipment isn't isolated in the network. Cost of the network, Doug, and I'll let you run through this real quick because you're going to add on the operational assets piece to it, but this is the culmination of the cost to actually build this network and the fiber that drops the electronics and the huts. Doug can talk a little bit about the operational assets, and from our perspective, we price this based on recent projects of similar style here in Arkansas. So barring some major and drastic shift in pricing, we feel pretty comfortable with these prices right now. We know that, with all the inflationary effects and some of the supply chain issues, we've done our level best to even account for that, but right now, even some of what we're seeing is a little unprecedented even for our experience in this industry. So, Doug, I'll hand it off to you for the rest of the operational piece and to finish this out.
Very good. So as you can see, this is the cost of the network. The big numbers came from Andy. That's the fiber. That includes a 5% contingency. So we always just add a little bit to the end of it just for a safety factor. Finley and us have been doing these things for many years. I don't think we've ever underestimated the cost of the network. So we try to make these a little conservatively high. So, I mean, the goal is that if you build it, it would come in a little bit less than that. The drops are what goes from the street. The fiber would go up and down every street on the map Andy showed you, and that goes, from the street to a business or to a home or to an apartment. Are the drops. The electronics. There's the electronics that Andy talked about, and the two major hubs, and then the two more minor hubs, and then also there's electronics at every single customer location. So that's where those all come from. At the home, this includes a Wi-Fi router, so that so nobody wires their computers anymore. So you have Wi-Fi in the home. There are the cost of the additional cost. You already have existing huts. This is really things that we put in the huts, sort of to make them ready, have redundant power, all that sort of thing. And then operational assets or vehicles, furniture, some software, just all sorts of other stuff it takes to be an operational ISP. Altogether, 28.2 million. That's a big number. This represents a 60% penetration rate, 60% of the homes buying service from you. The drops in the electronics both change if we have more customers or less customers than that. So it gets a little higher or a little lower. And I have a slide coming up where you'll see that. Passings are, in our world, just means somebody who's a potential customer. So that's every single family home, every duplex, every condo, every apartment unit, every business in town. We came up with using the GIS data and also looking at the electric data for meters and stuff. We came up with 8,826 potential customers. That's a passing of 3,199 costs to get past everybody. And so, and connecting 60% of them for that number. As soon as we saw that number, first thing we know is it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to make this work. It's not an automatic work. If it's 2,000, these things just make a ton of money. 3,000 is still very good, but it just means, and I'll show you the numbers here in a minute, it'll be a little bit harder. When we start working on rural networks, if we looked outside of town, you'd be seeing $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 a passing. And those folks need giant grants to make it work. But here, that you can make this thing work. So, and we'll talk about, that's where I'm coming next. This is the financial analysis, and it has red on it, and I don't want you to get scared by that, because if you look at these numbers, you'd throw us both out and go, well, this thing doesn't work. What the heck are you talking about? We could lose $10 million. What this shows you, first off, we have a very, very conservative financial model. And so we do that on purpose. Just like Andy overestimates the cost of the network, I underestimate everything else, because we want to say, here's the worst it can get. And then we talk about how we can make these numbers better. And so, one of the biggest changes in here, one of the most conservative things in here is we'd assume that broadband costs $60 in a town where Cox charges $85. That's a heck of a discount. Just raising that number alone up to $65 or even $70 drastically changes these numbers. We've also assumed you would borrow money over 20 years. Something simple like borrowing it over 25 years drastically improves these numbers. So there's about a half a dozen ways that are under your control that you can do to make these numbers better. And so what this shows you here, sorry, I didn't mean to change that, or you haven't. What this shows here, we looked at between 50 and 70% penetration just to see what happens. And so 60 was the one I showed you on the slide before. It almost breaks even over 20 years. It loses $400,000 over 20 years. You don't want to lose anything. But again, with all those improvements, I think that the actual break even in the town could be brought somewhere between 45 and 50%. One of the recommendations will be to start pinning down those assumptions and really get a solid business plan that you believe in. This is a whole range of very conservative estimates. But even with being very conservative, it makes quite a bit of money at 65 and 70%. You know, the survey said everybody in town would buy it. I don't know that we actually ever believe that. I wouldn't show you a business plan with 86% of the people buying it, because some of them will not, but that's what they said they would do. So that makes it, you know, that survey gave us very good feeling that it's very possible to make broadband work here either. Also, because you're not going to be at the bottom end of this curve, you're going to be somewhere in the middle or the higher end. And what we see when we talk about these penetration rates, you don't get them right away. Our model says these are the penetration rates after being in business for 5 years. It takes a while to convince people to join your network, so they don't all join it the first year by any means. Again, ways to improve the bond, get bonds or any kind of financing for longer terms, higher prices than $60. I'm going to talk in a bit about grant funding, because there is some grant funding that we think is going to be available, and any grant funding drastically changes those results in your favor. It's also not unreasonable. Every Muni Electric, and I've got about 75 Muni Electric clients, they usually assign some of the cost of this network to the power grid, because it actually has a massive benefit for the power grid. You know, Andy will talk a bit about smart grid here probably when he talks about the grant, but you can put fiber to connect to every outside device, really make your network safe, make it resilient, make it so that when you can know when people are losing their power barely before the neighborhood knows, and be out and fixing it right away. There's some major benefits. And even a really minor allocation of, you know, 5 or 10% of the cost of the fiber to the power is justifiable, because the electric company really does benefit by it. You also can, you know, I've assumed in here that you're borrowing with bond money and those earlier numbers. You know, you can borrow internal cash, or you borrow other places that are safe. There's guaranteed federal loans that are far below interest rates. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can cut the costs here. Again, I believe the break even is probably between 45 and 50%, which is, you know, only you can, we don't recommend whether you should do this or not, but that's the number you should probably start with to say, do we think we can do that well or not? That's really the decision about whether to move forward. We also looked at what this would look like if a commercial ISP did it instead of the city. That last set of numbers were the city taking out bonds to do it. A commercial ISP just has a different set of financing costs. For one thing, they have to put equity in. No bank loans you money to build a fiber network unless they call that putting skin in the game. If an ISP doesn't want to put some of their own money into it, that makes it too easy for them to walk away if it fails. And so banks want ISPs to put in real cash money. So that's one reason that their performance looks a little better, because that, you know, that doesn't have any interest expense associated with it. It's also a different kind of financing. Bank loans are more like, if any of you have ever built a house with a construction loan, when they're building the network, they only borrow the money each month for the stuff that gets built that month. In bond financing, you borrow all of it up front. So for the first 2 years, you're paying a ton of interest expense before the network is built. All that together makes it a little bit more profitable for them. Believe it or not, most ISPs would not find these numbers to be that attractive. And the reason is that 10-year cash line. If you look, they put in $4.3 million, and after 10 years, they might not even get their original money back. This is not a good return for a commercial ISP. Again, their break even also would probably be lower. This is also a conservative look for them. So that, you know, it could be better for them, but using those same conservative assumptions. One thing you're not going to see with a commercial ISP would be $60 rates. If you do invite an ISP into town, their rates probably won't be as high as Cox, but they're not going to be real far below those probably. So again, the key variables, if you wanted to really decide to move forward, you want to pin all these down. You want to look at interest rates real hard. You want to look at how long you could borrow the money for. You want to take a super hard look at prices. And again, you know, if we wait too long, if you wait 3 years to do this, we got to take a fresh look at Andy's numbers again. So they you know, they're not going to stay the same over time. There is some grant money available. First off, you know, I don't know if you have any of your ARPA funds left, but you're allowed to use that for broadband. You know, the biggest opportunity we think are smart grid grants And those are really interesting because even though that legislation's now been out for almost a year, we don't still know anything about them. What they've done is something very unusual. The money is going to pass down to the states, who are then going to make the electric grid grants. And that's actually good because I think that Muni Electrics probably have a really good shot at that money because of that. However, the states have never made energy grants before, so they're all going, how the heck are we going to do this? So they're kind of figuring out who in the state is going to do it. It's probably going to be at least another year before these are real grants. We will keep on top of it, but these grants are to improve your electric network, and the number one way to improve your electric network is to hook more of it up to fiber. Well, that fiber can also be used to get to people's houses. So, if you could get $2, $3, $4, or $5 million out of one of the, maybe 10, we don't know, but some number of $1 million out of those grants, it would make a really big difference to those financials I showed you. We did not assume any grants. There are also potentially some interesting smaller grants. There are grants that can go to low-income neighborhoods. There's grants that could be used to hook up apartment buildings. They wouldn't be giant money, but with grant money, every dollar counts. And so, if you're going to do this, we would turn over every rock and we'd look at every grant. There's also some very interesting and very large grants for what they're calling digital literacy, which means getting computers into homes and getting computer training for folks. And that gets more people on the network, and that gets more people who are ready to buy broadband. So at the end of the study here, really I have 3 choices listed here. There's really 4th. The choice that's not listed here is do nothing. Everyone has broadband today. They're not happy with the price, but it, mostly works. But your 3 choices are really, is the city willing to invest anything in broadband? And if so, how much? And that's, the feasibility study goes into great detail about how that might work. We have timelines in there. We talk about all the different kind of expenses. The business plan we built includes an estimate of the number of people you'd have to hire. It's very detailed. But another option is to try to pull an ISP to come to town and use their own money to do it. And possibly this new Brightspeed company might be interested. And so, and then the 3rd possibility is to do some kind of public-private partnership where you and an ISP together would do something. If you're all interested in the 2nd and 3rd items, one of the first steps will be to just reach out to ISPs in the region just to see if anybody's interested. There may not be, and you also may have 6 of them who are interested. It's a very unusual time in the industry where, I worked with the city in Colorado recently where we went out to look for ISPs 3 years ago and they didn't get 1 response. We went out again 3 months ago, and they got 5 legitimate offers to come to town and build the broadband network. The number of people willing to invest in broadband right now is sort of mind-boggling. Part of it's due with the grants, but in that city, they look just like you. They're not likely to get very much in the way of grants. So the next steps then, and these really, other than reaching out to ISPs, most of these steps are what you would do next if you want to consider, the electric utility and Philip running an ISP here. Who's going to do all the work to investigate all this? Reach out to ISPs if that's at all of interest to you. It's almost something that you should just do because you never know what kind of offer you'll get. It's like, why not at least reach out, right? I think you want to really talk about how to bring the public into this. I've never seen a public more ready for broadband than the people in your town. So I think they would really appreciate giving input. They certainly didn't spare any effort telling us that they wanted better broadband, let me tell you. We don't want to create that very specific business plan, really pin down what your prices might be, that sort of thing, so that you don't have that generic chart I did, but you get a real business plan. And then, get those grant opportunities. We think those are probably a year off, but we want to be ready for them. What you want to do is be ready for them because even though they're a year off, they might come out and say you have to file in 90 days. So we'd want to start getting ready for them just, so when they come out, you're ready to go. You want to review local policies. Are there any, no one's really built a whole citywide network since the cable network was built. You want to make sure that you haven't put any rules in place, not only official rules, but there's a lot of unofficial rules. The city engineers and the physical plant folks might have all sorts of rules on permitting and stuff that they make carriers go through that would be a real problem if you had to follow those rules to build everywhere. This is a good chance to take a look at that. And in doing so, you would be relaxing the rules for the other folks as well. But that might save you a ton of money. It's always worth looking. And then tackle the other broadband gaps. You know, I think like all cities, you have folks who can't afford broadband. You have folks who don't have computers in their home. You know, there's some things that you can do to sort of fill those gaps up. So that's our presentation. Again, I'm Doug Dawson. There's both Andy and I's contact information. I also have been writing a daily blog about exactly these issues for the past 8 years or so. So if you really are interested in this stuff, you could look through that. It tells you, it gives you a more detailed description of everything we just talked about, I think. So, so let's open it up. The questions you have for us. I'd be glad to answer anything you'd like to hear.
Yep. And hey, and Doug, I did want to add one other small detail on some of the energy side of things. So and I didn't mention this earlier, when we designed all of the network, we actually took your electrical assets, considering reclosers, capacitor banks, switches, and voltage regulators, which are really the key components of your electrical grid when it comes to quality of the electrical system. And that's something, you know, that we do, and that's pretty standard. So we actually design fibers to every single one of those devices that are in your system today for future control. And why that's important, as Doug mentioned, there's some of the grant opportunities, and those are really focused on redundancy, resiliency, and now you're really starting to see as a part of the IIJA funding, which is the bigger federal funding bill, you're seeing in all of the funding mechanisms now a lot of narrative on climate. So whether that's climate resiliency, whether that's impacts from climate change, but also are there things that you're doing in your network deployment to help minimize climate change? So when you wrap redundancy, resiliency, and climate together, there begins to become a narrative for power management that is an electric utility as you look at maintaining better power, and then there's this longer discussion of, and it's really kind of messy right now, is what is the introduction of electric vehicles do to your power grid? At what point in time do enough vehicles charging at home begin to impact the redundancy, or not the redundancy, but really the quality and the resiliency of your network? And again, that's not a scare tactic. That is just something that's getting a lot of discussion. We're looking at it because it's kind of an unknown right now. But as Doug mentioned, some of this energy funding that's coming down the pipe, and there's $70 billion in that pile of money, it will be specifically for redundancy, resiliency, and you will start seeing some climate wrap around in there too. So as Doug said, it's important. We've got a lot of elements built in here for the actual grid itself. And it is positioned to be, should some of that funding make sense for you down the road, we can pull pieces and parts out of this to show what the impact to the grid is, even from the fiber network point of things. So if you had anything you want to add to that, Doug?
I do, actually, because, you know, climate change is one of those DC words. What we're really talking about, we covered it earlier. What are you going to do to be ready for a tornado? Because eventually you'll have one. I mean, it's really things that you can do to the network to make it come back real fast after you have damage to it. So, I mean, that's what really those grants are aimed at. So.
Okay, I think we're clear, Doug. So,
yep.
Philip and Mayor, if there's any questions, we're more than happy to dive in.
So, thank you, Doug, and thank you, Andy. Board, you were given the study about a month or so ago. It's 220 some odd pages, I think. That's a very short summary of their analysis. So there's a lot of information in there. I had one quick question, Doug. You mentioned that the FCC are they now defining fast internet as 100 and 100 megabytes down and 20 megabytes up? Because that's always been an issue.
They suggested it last week. They haven't voted on it yet. So last week, the chairman suggested that they move to that. But it kind of doesn't really matter because all these federal grants already defined it at that. So for all practical purposes, that is the new definition. But the FCC is sort of playing catch up now. The other places went ahead of them. So that really is the practical definition these days.
So I just wanted to say, you know, Arkansas broadband plan came out a few years ago, and we had some internal discussions. I had a lot of questions. Why aren't we going after it? And it was to provide people with broadband that don't have high-speed internet, which the state defined as 25.3. Well, we have 25.3. There's 25.3 today. There's 110 today here in Siloam Springs. We did have ARPA money, 3.5 or 3.8 million. I can't remember what the final number was. That money we've been setting on in case this board wants to go forward with trying to do something with broadband. So there is some money set aside to kickstart something off if that's where the board wants to go. I've read through the report a couple of times. I have probably 100 questions. Every time I read it, I come up with more questions. But it's very interesting because I think Doug and Andy did exactly what the committee was asking them to do, which is to look at the city doing it itself, to look at the city doing it with a partner, public-private partnership, or to get an ISP to come in on their own, and also to look at an open access network, which didn't really pan out. I think the committee members, we were somewhat interested in that open access network. But if you haven't had the chance to read through that report, I would encourage you to do so. It's very detailed, but it does give us at least a place to start. And in the back of that report, Doug, you had some sections in there, pardon me one second, about the competitive response from the incumbents, what we would likely see them do. And I think this city has some history with that from our early 2010s when the city went to a vote before to do it, and we saw what Cox did. The benefits of broadband, the risk of being an ISP, and community outreach suggestions, and try to find an ISP partner. But please, board, if you have questions for this group, by all means, feel free to ask them.
Madam Mayor.
So I'll just open it up, and directors, as you want to ask.
Okay. Philip touched on it, but I'd kind of, because citizens don't have this, and I kind of would like to go through that.
And we're gonna put it up line tomorrow morning. It'll be on the web.
Yeah. So to answer the question, though, financial analysis on running the conduits and having the open, can you explain that, why it did not work? Because you said it didn't work out, and that's just how it was.
Sure.
Yeah, because of the commercial ISP, we're never going to get anybody to come in here with those prices.
Now, what didn't work is a pure open access. And what open access means is you would build the whole network, not just the conduit, but you'd build everything. And then you would lease connections to as many ISPs who want to get in the network. It could be 2, 3, 4, or 5 of them. That just didn't pan out, and the reason was pretty straightforward. If you're an ISP, your average revenue is probably $70 a customer, and open access, your average revenue is only like $35, but the network costs the same. It's just not enough money to pay for a network. But what you just described, where the city would build conduit and then somebody else would use it, that's a public-private partnership, and that actually looks like it could work. So it all depends. I mean, it all boils down to how well we can negotiate a deal with an ISP, because they're going to want to try to make it as much in their favor as possible, and you're going to want to make it as much in your favor as possible. But that, where each of you put in money, that could definitely work. So that's certainly a possibility. In fact, if you went out to talk to ISPs, what we would normally do is say, give us ideas. How would you like to work with us? And some of them may propose exactly that. They may say, look, you build the conduit, and then we'll come in and put our own fiber in it. And so, in fact, the city of West Des Moines, Iowa is doing that right now. They're building conduit to every house. Then any ISP can come in and connect to anybody they want by putting their own fiber into it. So that is a definite possibility. So again, we have to find an ISP willing to do it, but there might be 3 of them for all we know. So
How many have you seen through one conduit? Have you seen competitive?
The conduits today are about a 2-inch tube, and they can be bigger. And inside that are little tubes. You could have 30 of them if you want it.
Have you seen that? I mean, have you seen that in a city where it's
Yes,
created a
yes.
competitive
In the
market?
very large cities like Seattle, there are, 30 different people using the same tube. Yes, ma'am. So that in a city your size, we would not get that many ISPs
Right.
because there's not that many of them around you. But yes, it's pretty much. And then if you do, we can also connect ISPs electronically, not physically. Instead of giving them fibers, we can give them bandwidth, and then you could hook up an unlimited number of them. So.
I have one more question, sorry. Might as well while we're sitting here. So you brought up the idea, on the grant funding page, you said there's also funding available for digital literacy and getting computers into the homes. Isn't that for more of a poverty area? Would Siloam qualify for that?
Well, there's two things there. First, there is low income plans out there. There's a federal program right now that any ISP can get $30 off the bill for customers. And what happens is the customer gets a $30 discount, but the ISP collects the $30 from the government. And that could apply to any product. So that's a low income plan, and a person has to be low income to qualify. For instance, their kids have to be getting, free lunch or something. There's also, though, the digital literacy is getting computers into homes or training people. You would be surprised how many folks who you think are fairly educated who could really use some computer training. So that's not necessarily low income. That's just helping people learn how to use computer better. Because you're trying to train folks up to the point where they could get jobs working on computers and work in their house and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, and there's different programs, whether it's through CDBG or EDA, and we have all the layers for GIS for Siloam Springs. I'll make a note to go back and look and see if there's, any high LMI areas. And we can do a quick screenshot, and that way you can at least see it, if there are. So we can get
There is actually.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get that over to Philip. That way you've got that graphic and kind of see how that lays out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering all those.
Anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So just, it's, you guys, great presentation. Thank the committee, because I know you put a lot of work into it. And my contact was Tim, who's no longer with Generations, but he kind of kept us, if you ask questions, he kind of kept with the committee what you guys were up to. So I appreciate the work. Just from my standpoint, I think where we're at is we have to, and it's on page 203, comparing the three options. I think that's where we're at as a city, because a large percentage of the citizens are not going to read. I'm just going to give you a heads up. And I hear you, but you can't force citizens to read this much documentation. It's not a reality. The reality is on us as a board, and we have to decide what this looks like. And from an economical standpoint, my thoughts are we need to reach out and see if there's anybody out there in the ISP world that even wants to partner. And once we get that question off the table, then we start narrowing this down. It's either a yay or a nay and what that would look like. And then we're down to two options. And then eventually, I think just through common sense, you will be down to one option, and then the money game comes in. I feel like I would just encourage us to consider what that looks like to partner, because as you read through this, we're creating another department, in essence, in the city, which means you're going to create another division, because the span of control, how we have it set up right now, and we make bigger government. And right now, the citizens of Siloam struggle with that, just like they struggle with Cox. I clearly made the statement, I have everything Cox in my home, everything. And it's a monopoly, and we'd like another option, but there just isn't one available right now.
Sure.
And we missed the window years ago, and now here we are today, and the price tag's increased. But those are the three questions we have to ask ourselves. And if we don't have a partner in the game, then the board as it exists now or in the future is going to have to ask that question. And I just think that's where we're at. But I appreciate your input.
No, great comments. So
I want you to know that I'm not even sure I can get Andy to read the whole report. So
I tried, Doug, but I only make it 20 pages at a time, man.
I put 2 highlights on, and you just saw the 3 comparisons.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Yes, I am one that really likes to summarize the Cliff Note version of the notes, but I understand that we do need to read the report, and we will. So this is going to sound like a silly question, but I just want to confirm that I'm understanding you. When it comes to seeing if there's anybody, an ISP that would want to partner with us, I think what I understood you to say is it could be 1 or it could be 3 or 4, and if we had 3 or 4, then obviously the cost is less to everybody coming in, but then we split the cost, the revenue. Does it work like that, or how does it work?
So Doug, can you?
yeah, mostly when you partner, you're going to end up with one partner.
Okay.
There'll be 3 or 4 who'll be interested. You know, your city's not large enough. I mean, you're not, you know, if you were 5 times or 10 times bigger, you might get 3 or 4. The city of Mesa, Arizona just got 4 different ISPs who are all going to build the whole city through this kind of partnership. But, you know, they got 100,000 homes. And so that makes a pretty big difference. So most likely here, if you get a partner, it's just going to be one partner. You might get a half a dozen who are interested though, but it does, they're probably not going to, each one of them is going to go, it's got to be me and only me. That's my guess. It's not impossible to get multiple. That's not normally for a city your size what I would expect though. So.
Right.
Hey,
Well,
Doug, since we're, I guess for context, since we're kind of rolling through this RFI process for several entities and have completed it, you want to give a little context on kind of what we've experienced with that, just for a flavor for what that looks like?
Yeah, you have 3 choices. You can do an RFQ, which basically ISPs just tell you who they are, and then you can decide to contact them if you want. An RFI, you actually ask them to make a real high-level proposal where they kind of tell you if they were your partner what that might look like. And an RFP, they actually come with a business plan. And so we don't like starting with RFP because it makes you pick a winner. The RFI is kind of the perfect way to go because they each come to you and go, hey, I would like for you to spend some and me to spend some. ISP2 might say, I'm willing to spend it all myself. Each one of them will come to you with a totally different idea. And then you can interview them and weigh those ideas and see which one of those are of interest. And there's still no firm proposal on the table. So you can come back and say, well, that's a nice idea, but what do you think about doing this way? I mean, you start a negotiation process. That's what's been working very well. I've been working on an RFP at least every week this year, an RFI with somebody this year. We're doing dozens of them because everyone's doing what you're doing. They're looking around. So, yep.
And we don't go into the RFI process with a preconceived outcome because we've done these and been completely shocked with some of the responses we get. We had one in New Mexico, very small area, and a provider approached and said, we don't want you to do anything else. We're going to build this out 100% fiber with our own money. And we've seen reactions across the board. So Doug, we really go into this with a no preconceived notion, but we need, good responses from providers.
so
Now,
when
the good news is you're way ahead of everybody else because we have the dollars calculated here. They know what it's going to cost if they do it. So most cities, when you invite them in, if their first question is, well, how much is it going to cost me? Because they don't want to go do a full-blown engineering study like Andy just did. So it's actually going to be easier for ISPs to talk to you because when you send out the RFI, you're also going to send out our study with it. So.
obviously I have a very limited understanding of all of this. It's a lot of information to take in. But have you dealt with other municipalities where there is a situation like we have with one provider sort of being the monopoly, and you come in with this sort of better offer, and then that one provider has some ways to entice their customers to stay with them. And then what happens to those percentages?
Well, that's the section of the study that says, how are the incumbents going to react? Because yes, the fact is, I would say that if there's any place we've worked in the past 5 years where the incumbent's going to have a hard time making people like them, it's you. Cox's $85 average price has not made a whole lot of friends. But but it's not impossible. Cox could come along and say, hey, look, we'll just go ahead and build fiber to everybody. They could do that. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. They could wrap it around their current wires without even asking your permission hardly. And so they certainly have the ability to do that. We don't see that very often, but it happens once in a while. And so, but if they're going to do that, they'll probably respond to the RFI and say, hey, don't do this. We're going to do it.
Gotcha.
Because that's certainly a possible reaction. If they come through and cut prices, they're actually going to make everybody in town mad. They're going to go, why didn't you do that years ago? That actually makes it worse for them, believe it or not. So.
Okay. Well, I would agree that I think in my opinion, our first step would be just to see if there would be anyone out there, ISP, that would be interested in partnering, to even see if that's a possibility.
So we are getting close to the 6:30. Is there anyone else that has a real quick comment or question?
I would just say if we're going to go forward.
Would you say that again into the microphone,
mic.
please?
I'm sorry, I didn't even see it sitting there. I think if we're going to take a next step, it would be to search for an ISP.
All right.
And thank you very much. I appreciate
Absolutely, absolutely. So I guess, and I know we got a little bit of time left, so there's another question, but as you guys are reading through the report, and I know Doug would say the same thing, as you guys are reading through the report, if there's any further questions, don't hesitate to let Philip know. There's even more information behind the scenes than what's in that report. So there's lots of gory details. I'm sure we have answers to questions if they come up. So I guess for my part and for Doug, it's been a pleasure to work with city and staff here doing this project and being able to present today. So if there's any other questions, we got I think 2 minutes. We might be able to handle one.
All right.
You might want to mention the other networks you're building in Arkansas. Yeah.
Yep. So just for context, and I know we've talked to Philip about this, but Clarksville Connected Utilities. We started that network in 2019. It finished last year. John Lester there is very, very happy with how that network is performing and the take rate he has on that network right now. Hope, Arkansas, we are just beginning construction of that network right now. I don't know the build schedule. They've had some material acquisition challenges, but we're beginning the construction of the Hope network. West Memphis, they allocated some ARPA funds to initial fiber network ring. And so we're beginning that network, kind of the detailed work and getting equipment and buildings. And I believe they actually just placed a fiber order today. So they're well on their way of building out those networks as well. So that's what we've done in Arkansas to date. It's just kind of been one after the other. And, so far they've run very well.
Good. Thank you. Philip?
Right.
So very quickly, if the board decides to go with an RFI, you guys could help us draft one.
Yes.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes,
I just
sir.
want to get that on the record.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and as Doug said, that has become a very not recent necessarily, but it's we have picked up a lot of traction in doing the RFI work here recently. So
Thank you. Thank you both.
yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we will adjourn our workshop. We'll take about a 5-minute break and we will start our board meeting. Call to order this regular Board of Directors meeting for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, August 2nd, 2022. Roll call.
Appington,
Here.
Smiley,
Here.
Burns,
Here.
Hunt,
Here.
Rissler,
Here.
Allen, Carroll.
At this time, if you all will please stand with me as Director Carroll leads us in prayer, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Father, tonight we give thanks. Give thanks for opportunity to be a part of this city. Father, you have given us a plan, and you have laid out our purpose. And you've declared your promise that what you begin, you will complete. We give thanks for that opportunity to be a part of your work. And we can make wise choices. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, I would ask that anyone that has an electronic device, please silence that. And thank you for that. Next is our public input time. I would ask if there was anyone in the audience that would like to address this board concerning any item that is not on our regular agenda. Yes, sir. Please come to the podium. Give us your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes.
My name is Charles Yancey. The address is 14450 Songbird Lane, and that is the property that adjoins Mission Hill, its entire length on the west side. They have done a lot of preparation work there. Now the soil where the houses are going to be built is about 4 to 6 foot higher than it used to be. And each place where it appears to me there's going to be a backyard, there's also a small trench that goes down that embankment toward the west. Okay, I've lived there 37 years. I've enjoyed a good well, but now every time it rains, I've got to buy water to drink. I've got to buy ice, and we have to scrub our plumbing fixtures a whole lot more often. I'm curious to know what they intend to do, if anything, about either retaining or diverting that water so it doesn't come across my property.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Shore Norbach, and I live at 1555 Villaview Drive. And just wanted to make a note, since directors Allen and Rissler and Sappington made a note last week in the last meeting regarding the meeting that we had on the 19th of May. I just want to make a note of the fact that I was one of the people who did question the integrity of that meeting as far as the question answer and the time that was given to the public to make the questions. And I want to attest to the fact that after the second question, the portion of the question answer part was pretty quickly shut off. And I don't want to question any basically reasons behind that as to why that took place. It seemed to me, and after I talked to Mr. Clark after the meeting and questioned that, he mentioned that there was a little anxiety about the gentleman who was asking the question about the cost of the project, and that obviously they couldn't come up with a very clear answer for him. And he mentioned to me, Mr. Clark, that it would have probably gone on a lot longer if he would have let it go. So I don't want to definitely make any judgment or any accusations. I just want to say I attest to the fact that the question answer was cut off. I went over there because I don't know anything about the project. I had not studied it. I hadn't received any surveys to fill out. But at the same time, I was interested in listening to the public and see what their questions were. And I was going to glean from the questions and answers. And there were a few people present in that meeting that I would have really liked to have listened to their questions. And they would have had the integrity of the positions in their, lives and careers that would have asked the probably very clear, good questions that I wanted to hear the answers to them. And also there has been a survey, I believe the planning department has sent out to the public regarding that project. And there had been some responses, and friends of mine have sent some responses regarding the actually giving some critiques to it, but also giving good reports about it and having excitements about some of the parts of the project, and also giving some ideas as to what they want to see changed on it. And I don't know if those surveys actually are available to all the board members to look at the results and kind of see what the public have sent in or not. And I was sharing that with you, Madam Mayor, last week. So that's all I wanted to say, because I was among those people who did question the integrity of that meeting, and I just wanted to attest to what the directors mentioned. And I appreciate everything all of you do, and God bless you so much. And I appreciate everything that the city staff and city manager did. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, sir. Give us your name and address, please.
Jeff Farmer.
Uh-huh.
I live at 21923 Davidson Road here in Siloam. I live on the property just north of the Mission Hills project that's going on. And I wanted the Roush Coleman representative or whatever to kind of reiterate what they're planning on doing with the privacy fences between me and the new developments that's going on. And also wanted to ask about the wording in a letter that I got from somebody named NWA LD LLC out of Fayetteville. And where everything that I have seen in the past, last year and this year, has all talked about single family lots. But this kind of tells me some kind of dwelling. It's a density, I guess it's the density of what's going to be out per acre for that. It doesn't really say acre, it didn't say lots, it says per acre. And I just want to make sure that they're just talking about single family homes per lot and not sneaking in some type of duplex that they stack on top of each other. Next thing you know, we got 3-story high building there, apartment building just across the fence from my home. And that's all I need.
Right, thank you. Is there anyone else? If not, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Ewing. I'm with Roush Coleman Homes, so I can help answer
Excuse me,
Mr.
can
Farmer.
you pull your mic up?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
That better?
Try it.
My name is David Ewing. I'm with Roush Coleman Homes. I just heard of the gentleman that lives on Songbird, his comments, and also Mr. Farmer's comments, which I've talked to him before. He kept me out in the sun about an hour one afternoon of 100-degree weather. As far as the water coming off the site, our engineers have done the calculations, worked with the city engineer to ensure there's no more water coming off our site at peak flows than there was pre-development. So all that is still balanced out on there. It's funneled into 2 detention ponds that are dry ponds to gather the water and then much more slower draining it out. I know Kevin's here, and he could speak to, we've gotten in the detention structure that's in the side now to help with that, to keep it going and flowing better during storm events on there. As far as Mr. Farmer, your comments, we are planning on to do only single-family homes. We don't have townhomes, condos, anything like that in there. So we do plan on only single-family homes. The density that you were referring to was how many units per acre we have. I believe the lots are about 6,000 square feet each. So whatever that works out to units per acre on there is the way that mathematical calculation works out. But we only plan single-family homes here. There'll be about 120 total on the 18.9-ish acres.
Madam Mayor,
Thank you.
can he answer the question about the privacy fence while he's here?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
So the privacy fences on there, we give the options of the privacy fence to the individual buyers that are purchasing the house. If they'd like a privacy fence, then they can put that into their contract and we build it for them. The majority of the homeowners, if they want a privacy fence, usually they'll try to factor that in because they can get it done and just include it for a couple more dollars in their monthly payment. The homeowners that don't take a privacy fence, and they just say we don't want one, then they either go into perpetuity without a privacy fence, or they come back later and put one in. Sometimes we'll see where a homeowner, maybe they get the 2 neighbors on each side, put one up, and then they get out where they only had to put the 2 pieces, the front and back, in there. But the privacy fence would be up to the individual homeowners.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Madam Mayor? Well, while you're here, and I appreciate it, last month I called the city admin for the project Development on Country Club, and as you do trench cuts across there, they're backfilled with SB2 that get washed out pretty rapidly and rutted up quickly. And so just to make the locals happy, or as I like to call them, the natives happy, which is, a challenge. They like you when they keep you in the heat. That's called Arkansas love, so just give you a heads up. Is there any way, city had a hard time contacting a developer because it's really the developer's issue. But the city did go out and backfill, it's a temporary, and they put some SB2 down because they were pretty gnarly, and I drive a large Tundra.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's just an inconvenience to them. And so as you develop that and make those cuts for utilities or whatever, I would just ask that whoever the local contractor is on site, that if they could just check that weekly, and just to make it easier, there is quite a bit of traffic on Country Club that accesses Siloam. And it's just kind of one of those things. It makes us feel better as we develop. Anything we can help the locals with to make their life a little easier, I would appreciate it.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I spoke to our paving contractor earlier this afternoon. So right now the schedule is we had some fiber line out there that had to be relocated. They've confirmed that job will be complete tomorrow, which allows us to get our grading crew back out there for the turn lane aspect. As soon as he gets done with grading out that turn lane, our paving contractor will come back in, and we expect to have the subdivision paved and Country Club patched up by the end of August, so about 30 days from now to get everything done, and then hopefully get it back to normal there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else? If not, is there anyone that would like to address the board concerning anything that is on our consent agenda? If not, then we will move on to the consent agenda. Item A, workshop minutes for July 19th, 2022. Regular meeting minutes, July 19th, 2022. Item C, Resolution 48-22, Final Plat Development Permit, Mission Hills Edition, Phase 1, 14505 Country Club Road. Item D, Resolution 49-22, Final Plat Development Permit, Carley Crossing Edition, Phase 3, 16,000 block of Arkansas Highway 43. Item E, Resolution 50-22, Final Plat Development Permit, Lawlis Ranch Edition, Phase 1B, 2800 block of North Teresa Drive. Item F, Resolution 51-22, Final Plat Development Permit, Foxtail Edition, Phase 2, 2400 to 2600 block of East Kenwood Street. And this item, the applicant has requested that this be tabled to the August 16th, 2022 meeting. Item G, 2023-2024 board goals. Item H, dedication of utility easements, 900 block of East Harvard Street. And that is the consent agenda. Directors, do you have any items that you would like to have pulled for further consideration?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to pull C and D.
C and D. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I also wanted to pull C.
Okay. Is there anyone else? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with items C and D withheld.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Ritzler,
Yes.
Carroll, Sappington.
Yes.
Motion is approved. So we will begin with item C, which is Resolution 4822, which concerns the Mission Hills Edition Phase 1. Director Hunt and Director Sappington have both asked for that, so we'll start with you.
Okay.
Mindy?
I just wanted to make sure that the two gentlemen, Mr. Farmer and Mr. Yancey, that approached us did get your questions answered. I think the engineer from Roush Coleman that spoke attempted to answer your questions. Do you feel like your questions were answered? Didn't want to just skip over that. To the best of our ability at this point. I know one of the questions does have to do with drainage, storm drainage. And actually, I probably didn't even need to pull item D, but I'm going to refer to something in item D because it has something to do with the storm sewer drainage. And it is the provision that, it's not really a provision, but a statement that says the preliminary drainage report for this phase of the subdivision, and this is for Carley Crossing, includes one detention basin on the northern property line. This basin has been oversized to reduce the peak flows, leaving the property to below pre-development levels. And it will have a water feature, water quality feature built in to slowly release the first inch of rain. The reason I point that out is I know that drainage is an issue. Lots of people. I mean, I've stood in 6 inches of water and mud in the back of people's yards. We've heard a lot about drainage being an issue for so many people around the town. It's something that the city's aware of. We're working on coming up with ways to solve it. I know that the feeling is sometimes it happens because of new development, but the reason I brought up that particular statement is because in my way of reading that, to say that the basin is oversized made me think that it was bigger than perhaps it needed to be, and that to me is a good thing. I know we have based some of our requirements for basins on previous rain levels, and I think going forward we need to do what we can to accommodate more recent rain levels. I know we did a study of rain levels just 2 or 3 years ago per my request because it seemed like we were getting so many concerns expressed just about the flooding, and it seemed to be more than had been in the past. And sure enough, the study determined that the levels of rain that we had gotten up until that point had been so much higher than in years past, and it hasn't slowed down in the last couple of years. Now, I think most of us right now would love a little bit more rain. We had a little bit of a reprieve last week. That was nice, but I guess my point is I would like to see us continue looking for ways that are going to accommodate those higher levels of rain going forward. And I understand the staff has been looking into that, and I just encourage that continue.
Thank you, Mindy. I think that we're having a little bit of a problem with the sound because your mic doesn't have a cover on it. We're going to replace that for you.
It's the way they teach us there.
There we go.
As students and employees. Is that better?
Thank you very much.
Now that I'm done, thank you. And I apologize.
Director Sappington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With these same issues, my question didn't get answered from Mr. Yancey. He has problems right now, and we need to look at during the construction times as well, not when it's complete, the detention ponds in use, but we need to protect the people around it during the construction times. I don't know how, but if he's having that much trouble and it's because of the construction, I believe him, and there's got to be something that could be done. And for Mr. Farmer, did we mention anything about the boundaries of this subdivision having fencing that would protect it from him? And then,
last year when this first came to be, we visited with it. You know, it was a drainage issue back then, but then it was actual, fences that's not going to have. Let's say a lot. Let's say start with when we look at the plat. You see, let's say lot 17. I've got something between lot 17 and a retention pond, which is not really going to have anybody there or nothing, And that's the area that I'm talking about, actually having a fence up or privacy fence up, and mainly for when they have cars coming around the corner of Annette Drive right there to keep headlights and stuff from out of my back porch out of the house or whatever, and that's kind of what that was for. So there's kind of a no man's land right there where you're going to have somebody that buys a house, but you're not going to have anybody that's going to have buy that little area there next to the retention pond. And we're talking about probably 30 foot or something like that, That's what that was all about.
all right, thank you. And another comment, the Rosh Coleman representative said there was going to be 120 homes on this 18.9 acres. And I believe in the summary it says the proposal is to subdivide into 65 single-family residential lots.
I'm sorry, I slightly misspoke there. The whole neighborhood will have 120 homes, or I believe that's the number there. The first phase that we're talking about tonight has 65 lots in it.
All right, thank you. That just kind of, that number went, whew, that's not what I read.
My fault, I apologize.
All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Philip.
I would like, if possible, for Kevin to come up, the city engineer, and just talk about the drainage a little bit, because I had a couple of questions for him as it relates to some of that drainage.
Mm-hmm.
And if if IT could put the first page of, at least in the packet, I don't know if you have it, but do you have anything to, can we put up a design of the subdivision? Do you have that by chance? You don't? Okay. There's a picture in the packet. That's not where we are, but Ben may know where we are. There we go. So this is a picture from probably in May, I think, so we don't have any of the streets really cut in, but based on the preliminary plat, or excuse me, the final plat of phase 1, the eastern half, the right half of this project is what phase 1 is, correct? Okay, and Mr. Yancey lives on the west side of this property, which is future phases. The comment was made, and I apologize if I don't get it right, but that the level of ground has been raised by, did you say? About 4 to 6 feet. Yes. So, Kevin, can you just kind of describe how those lots are intended to drain? There you go. That's better. Those lots that are in very light shade of gray, how they're going to get, how that runoff, or is that runoff going to get to one of the 2 detention ponds that are in the bottom right-hand corner and upper right-hand corner?
Yes. So basically what we have here, phase 1, the north portion of the site, about half the site is going to drain to the northeast pond, and the south portion of the site will drain to the southeast pond, as well as portions of phase 2. And what we see here on the west, because of the elevation difference, it's not enough to get over to the detention ponds. So they have reduced the amount of area that is flowing directly off site to make up for that. And so a portion of these lots will drain north, and then there's an old spiral metal culvert under Songbird Lane here. And then the back half of these lots, probably from the roof line west, will drain across Mr. Yancey's property.
And so was the original design for this, however many acres total, was it draining to the west?
Correct.
A portion at least
existing
of it?
conditions,
Okay.
a portion of this was draining to the west.
So until phase 2 gets built, is there, I don't know what you call them, is there the erosion control sock, what's that called?
Wattles or silt fence.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wattles, I never know that term. The erosion control sock is what I call it. Is that in place on that side to prevent some of that erosion from occurring until phase 2 happens?
Correct. That has been in place, and we can go take a look at that and make sure that it's functioning properly. I will also mention that kind of the in-between construction phases of a lot of projects, because of the clay that we have in our soils, we'll oftentimes see kind of excess runoff from what the final project result will be. So please keep that in mind as well.
Let's, for the sake of discussion here, let's make sure that those wattles are in place. And if you don't mind, Mr. Yancey, if you'll give Kevin your contact information, let's set up a time to go out there and just walk it with him and you, and just make sure that everything's working the way it was originally designed, okay? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I'll just, this isn't the only subdivision, and this board's had this conversation multiple times. When you build in wetland prairies where they're predominantly surrounded Siloam Springs, Arkansas, Kenwood is another example. If you guys take the time to go out to Kenwood and see how it was built up. On East University, there's a cul-de-sac in my neighborhood where a new construction was built, and that pad is built up larger than any of the other homes, which are predominantly historical homes, built 100 years ago. So the building is different, but that is our challenge with expansion. When you take away Mother Nature and the percolating system that makes our water clean, if you watch any of these board meetings, we've this conversation will continue on, and I would say for decades to come, we will have a water challenge. And it's not going to stop with this, because we're going to get to phase 2. It's going to be change in your back door, and no matter what we do, there is going to be change. That's just the way it is, and I appreciate the engineer, but when you're shoving water down a metal tube cul-de-sac, it doesn't change the water quality, and it is going to impact you in some way. So the city will work, but it is a difficult task. The folks directly to the north of this project, behind this large retention pond, came to this board when this project first came on, and they didn't want us to build anything because they had moved to the country right next to the city limits. Everybody's impacted with growth and development in a positive and negative way, and I just encourage you, and I know us as a board have asked, and it's on the city admin's plate, and we're a little bit behind the curve, but all of Northwest Arkansas is with this growth. But please don't use backdoor information that's out there, because it is total misinformation. Take advantage, reach out to the city administrator, work with the city engineer, and stay in direct contact with them. And if I can help you in any way, because we're still, I think that's still in Ward 2. Yep, we made it in Ward 2. So if they're not making you happy, I'm on the city website. It's B Burns, just like fire, at SiloamSprings.com, and I respond to email by coming and visit with you. I don't do social media, and I don't get in email battles. I like to solve problems face to face, and that's the only way to do it on this. But there is going to be impact for quite some time out there. So this isn't going to be an overnight solution. I just want you to be prepared for that. But please, if the city doesn't work with you to your full expectations, then by all means reach out to me, and I'll be happy to see what I can do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brad. Yes.
Madam Mayor, I have one more question for Kevin or Ben, and I would just, a lot of times when we go to final plat, everything's completed. Roads are in, sewer and water's in, electricity's in, all the tests have been done, final grading has been done. This particular subdivision, I believe, Kevin or Ben, you can answer, they're putting up a performance bond. Usually it's 120% or something of the estimated cost to complete the subdivision. So as it relates to phase 1, we won't release that money until everything in phase 1 is complete. So I want all the public to know, this is the final plat. Phase 1's not going to come back to you, but part of the option for a developer to get to final plat is to have everything built and completed and finished, and they can get a final plat approval, or to put up the cash, basically a performance bond with the city, and we can cash that if they don't complete the subdivision. So there may be portions within that phase 1 that aren't complete from a public's viewpoint, but the developer is on the hook to complete that in order to be able to eliminate that performance bond with the city. And Ben and Kevin, you guys are shaking your head that that's correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Anyone else? Yes, sir. If you'll come to the podium and give us your name and address, please.
My name is Tim Howard. I live at 1901 Endura Park Drive, which would be in the newer development, well, the houses are lived in, obviously, on the southern edge of this development, and I think we're going to be in phase 2. And I'm new to the area, and we're getting a lot of runoff, and I figure that's just kind of part of, getting used to where I live in a new neighborhood. But I guess my question is, well, I know my question is, will the new development houses, when they're eventually built, will their lot line match my lot line? Because behind my fence, there's a shallow little bar ditch that's fairly ineffective, and it's full of grass and weeds and stuff. And if
their lot line, say there's a 4-foot kind of no man's land between our fences, who's going to maintain that because of fire hazard when it gets overgrown with weeds, and it also slows down the water flow? Any of that, is that, I guess my question is, who's going to maintain that, or will their lot line be my back fence as well, so that will be their yard to maintain?
Thank you. Philip, do you?
Either Ben or Kevin can answer that. I think it's going to be adjoining lot lines, but
Yeah, Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner, that's correct. We're not going to have a gap or ditch between the properties. It would be one fence line from the rear yard of the Mission Hills would match up the rear yard of Endura Park.
Thank you, Ben. Directors, anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 48-22 for the final plat Mission Hills Edition?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Burns.
Yes.
Hunt.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Carroll. Sappington.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Director Hunt, on item D, is there any other questions or comments that you have concerning that resolution?
No, I think I've covered that. Thank you.
Directors, anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 49-22 for the final plat Carley Crossing Edition?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Hunt.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Carroll. Sappington.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next is our ordinances. Ordinance 22-19, third reading, amending section 102-21 of the City Municipal Code, rezoning from A1 to PD 500 block of North Progress Avenue. Ben?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Mayor, members of the board, Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. So this is the rezone of the property to the PD Plan Development District that will have a variety of land uses, including commercial and institutional. There have been no additional comments since the first reading, and we are still supportive of the ordinance, and we are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 22-19? If there is not, directors? There is no other comments or questions. Do I have a motion to place Ordinance 22-19 on its third and final reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Whistler.
Yes.
Carroll. Sappington.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Hunt.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
ordinance number 22-19, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from A1 to PD the property located in the 500 block of North Progress Avenue.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt Ordinance 22-19?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Carroll. Sappington.
Yes.
Smiley.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Hunt.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Ordinance 22-19 is adopted. Next is Ordinance 22-20, second reading, annexation of 14.087 acres, 21,000 block of Arkansas Highway 16. Ben?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Mayor, members of the board. So this is the annexation to take in the 14 acres off of Highway 16 just south of Keck Road, and to also zone as PD with a density cap of 132 dwelling units. There have been no additional comments since the first reading, and staff remain supportive of the ordinance and are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 22-20? If there is not, directors? There's no comments or questions, then I would ask for a motion to place Ordinance 22-20 on its second reading, suspending the rules and reading title only.
So
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes?
Hunt,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Carroll.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 22-20, an ordinance accepting the annexation of certain territory described as the 21,000 block of Arkansas Highway 16 to the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and assigning the same to a ward.
Thank you. Next is ordinance 22-21, first reading, amending section 102-21 of the City Municipal Code, rezoning from R3 to R2, the 2400 to 2600 block of East Kenwood Street. Ben?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Mayor. Ben Rhodes. So before you is a rezoning permit, first reading, going from R3 to R2. That's a down zoning by 1 degree. This is a location of the Foxtail Final Plat Phase 2. And just to remind the board, there was a similar rezoning request that was approved by the board last March that covered Phase 1 of the same subdivision. And so this present request finishes out the entire subdivision, so it would be under one zone, which would be the R2 zone. And that would be consistent with the subdivision design for single-family homes. Staff has requested that this rezoning occur to prevent any future conversion of the single-family homes into duplexes, which could happen if we keep the R3 zone in place. Here you see the site plan with the proposed area for rezoning as not hatched in, which shown as Phase 2. Just looking at the future land use map, we see that as being consistent with the proposal for under Neighborhood 1. And this is the brand new future land use map, by the way, so from the 2040 comp plan. And then here you see the property. This is looking towards the north. Staff is recommending approval with no needed conditions, and we are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address ordinance 22-21? There is not. Directors, comments or questions? There being none, I would ask for a motion to place ordinance 22-21 on its first reading, suspending the rules, reading title only.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes?
Hunt,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Carroll, Sappington.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 22-21, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from R3 to R2, property located in the 2400 and 2600 block of East Kenwood Street.
Thank you. Next is ordinance 22-22, first reading, annexation of 1.96 acres at 21733 Carousel Drive. Ben?
Yes, thank you again, Madam Mayor and Board. So before you is a new annexation request to take in about 2 acres off of Highway 16 on the area known as Carousel Drive. This is located just south of the Day Springs warehouse and across from the Day Springs corporate office off of Highway 16. The request adds this land to Ward 3, and the zone will be R2, which is residential single family. I would like to make a note that there was reference in the legal notice to MH zone, but that is no longer part of the plan. They're doing R2 for the entire annexation. Here is the site plan that was provided with the application showing the property. And then here is a zoning survey. This is a future lot split survey. It hasn't been filed yet, but it just shows you the proposed areas that will be, both lots will be for the R2 zone once annexed in. So because it's incorporating zoning, we are also looking at the future land use map here, and it is also the neighborhood one, which is of course consistent with the R2 zoning, which is what we did just a moment ago for the Foxtail subdivision. And then here you see the site. This is looking to the north. We are recommending approval with no needed conditions, and we stand ready for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 22-22? If not, directors, comments, or questions? There are none. I would ask for a motion to place Ordinance 22-22 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Carroll, Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley. Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 22-22, an ordinance accepting the annexation of certain territory described as 21,733 Carousel Drive to the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and assigning the same to a ward.
Thank you. Next is Ordinance 22-23, first reading, amending City Code Chapter 98, establishing the Siloam Springs Utility Commission. And Philip?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Board. So back in April of this year, staff presented information to the board of characteristics, I guess, of various municipal utility boards that we had researched in Arkansas and in Oklahoma. And at that time, the board asked staff to draft a set of regulations establishing a utility advisory board for the city of Siloam Springs. So staff tried to take the highlights of those various boards that we previously researched, which include Hope, Arkansas, Pryor, Oklahoma, Clarksville, and Bentonville, Arkansas. And we reviewed those again and then drafted a set of regulations that was presented to the board back on July 5th. So the ordinance that you have before you would establish a utility commission. It would provide for a 5-member commission serving 3-year staggered terms. Members would be appointed by a majority of the city board and removed by the same. Commission members would be compensated the same as planning commission, which would be $100 per regular meeting. Regular meetings held monthly, and the senior staff of the utility divisions and departments would be attending along with the city administrator at least for the beginning of that commission. And then the charge of the commission would be to provide recommendations to the city board regarding all of the utilities, electric, water, wastewater, and sanitation, as it relates to strategic guidance, rates, debt, services, any intergovernmental agreements, wholesale purchases, all as it relates to the operations of those franchises. The fiscal impact, as stated, roughly $6,000 in compensation for those commission members, $6,000 a year total for all 5 of them based on $100 a month. Madam Mayor, I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 22-23? There is not. Directors, comments and questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mark.
I just wanted to ask Philip, what is the feeling of the department heads for each one of those utility divisions?
Well, I think there's a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of maybe it's a good thing. I mean, it's an unknown, right? The idea, at least, is, you know, what I've explained to the department heads is that the idea is to take some of the pressure off this board and to create an advisory board that really is intended to look at the operation of the franchise as a business. That's the way they're supposed to be operated, and to treat them as a business and to make recommendations to you as the city board. So there's another step in the process. If we're talking about you know, I don't know, an intergovernmental agreement with whoever, or talking about rates or whatever it is, we'll have to go to that utility board and see, you know, explain the issue just like we would do to the city board, and ask them to research it, do their review of it, and ultimately make a recommendation to the city board. So I think there's some benefits to it that we see, and there's, you know, as in anything with the public or with staff, a little apprehension of the unknown. But that's normal. Changes what happens. So you know, some are excited about it because they think it might be a positive thing. Some are a little apprehensive about it. Just, you know, understanding exactly what we're going to have to take to them, and that's going to be a learning curve for staff. We tried to, in the ordinance, we tried to really describe, and what I just said, strategic guidance. Not only obviously rates, but, you know, if we're going to issue any debt, they need to recommend it. But services. So if we're going to change, like we did in 2015 when I got here, the city was involved in changing from twice a week trash service to once a week automatic trash can service. That whole process would have to go to that advisory board first. Chances are we are in the process this month of pulling back the recycling bins that have been outside the fenced area at sanitation. We notified you we were going to do that a couple of months ago because of the problems. Likely we would have to get at least support of the advisory board now to do that also. So it's another step in the process, and I think it will have advantages to it once it gets set up and gets at least some understanding. It'll all be really conditioned on, I think, who applies to be on that commission and who gets appointed to be on that commission. So, there's great folks here in the city that want to serve, and there's an opportunity for them to serve.
Well, I just wanted the department heads to know that they were an integral part of this process and to see what their feelings were. So thanks. Yeah, I know, change is hard.
It's harder for some than others, yes. As you know, we're all human nature. I do want to point out, if I may, you approved the board goals earlier, and one of the potential goals that didn't make the list but made the parking lot list is the solar buy-all sell-all. And in that, I said that subject to the establishment of this. So, 2 weeks ago or 2 meetings ago, I understood you wanted to take, not do anything with rates for 2023 and take that to this board or this commission. And that would be the other piece that right off the bat that we will take to this commission for advisement.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I have
Lisa.
2 questions. We have people that do not live in the city limits that have city utilities.
Yes, ma'am.
So would they be eligible to be on the board?
We didn't write any specific, I don't believe we wrote anything in there that said that they couldn't.
Okay.
I think it may be something Jay and I need to speak to, and depending on what your preference might be, you have to understand a couple of things. I could have city electric outside the city limits. I potentially could have city water. I'm most likely not to have city sanitation, and I'm most likely not to have city sanitary sewer. So if you were to appoint someone on the commission who lived outside the city, it is unlikely that they would be a customer to all 4 of those utilities. So that would be something I would say, you just want to be at least aware of if you decide to do that.
But it could be like that now. We could have people in city limits that do not have all the utilities.
That is true. You could have, there are properties in the city that don't have city sewer, correct? Yeah.
Or water.
Don't know about that one, but it's possible, yeah. My understanding is at least everybody has water, but I could be wrong.
And we talked at one point about, when they were on this commission, about having training. Did we decide not, that's not going to be part of it?
Nope,
or?
we didn't decide not. If you look at one of the, give me one second there. There's something in there about meetings. And one of the, I think what we, and I apologize, I have to find it, but we didn't specifically state that there's training, but the idea is that they would begin regular meetings in June of 2023, being that through January through June, we would do our best to bring them up to speed on everything. And so Bentonville in theirs had specific hours of training. I don't know where they're going to get that. I mean, there was ethic training, there was a training every year, and we couldn't figure out how they were going to make sure they provide that. But at least from our perspective, just like new planning commissioners, in some cases, maybe more so than new board members, they're gonna when you set up this board, they're gonna have some training. We want to take them out and hopefully walk them around the water plant, the water treatment plant, take them to sanitation, get them fully comfortable about what's going on first, because before they can really talk about rates or talk about services or any of that stuff, they have to fully, I think, immerse themselves into how the operations go. So that's at least the plan today.
Okay, so that's internal training.
Yes.
I was thinking we were going to do external training.
No, that's where we couldn't figure out where Bentonville was going to get their training and what kind of training we were going to bring them in to do.
Okay.
So we want to educate them so that they at least fully understand their role and the process of the utilities themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about ethics, but they're not making hard decisions. So it's not as from a standpoint of the ethical training that you have to do and the ethic demands that you're required. But we haven't, earlier, a month ago, there was a question about an application, and I was waiting to see where this was going to go before I start working on the application process, before I start trying to develop any training programs.
Okay. Thanks.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So section 98, .90 or -908 required training right now is 8 hours. Obviously, if you're going to want to be on that board, you want to participate. If they refuse, can't meet a timeline, that sort of thing, it'll come back. And obviously, it's just like the requirements of the board, right? We've got to meet X amount of meetings per year. And so there's a very vague section on there that I'm sure as this goes on, I'm sure this future board will want probably expect more. Just a quick reminder, this isn't our first time. This is like bell bottoms coming back in style. We've had this board before. And everything old becomes new again. There are people in this community that are in their 70s that have served as board members that have been on that utility board. Just ask around what their experience is with that board and why that board is no longer in place. And where I am for this board, I don't want citizens to get excited. You may not like the information they provide back to this board. I will be very cautionary when I say this. There will be a utility crease of some nature. If it's 0.05%, somebody in this community will exploit that and bash on the board and then bash on this board. And so just be aware, it is out there. We've been very generous dipping in reserves to offset costs. But if this board runs this as a business, there is no business that continues to dip into reserves. So just be aware, and I know inflation and I know everything out there, but just be aware 23 and 24, there is going to be information that some people in this community won't be happy with. I hope, and I'm optimistic because that is my nature, that this utility board somehow minimalizes that negative impact. And because I will be that end customer out there also. But just be aware, no matter what levels you go to, there is going to be some amount of change in some point in the near future, and it may be very minimal, but I think this board is doing the right thing by creating this utility board to hopefully offset some of those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Anyone else?
Mayor, if I
Yes.
may,
Yes,
just
Jay.
to respond quickly to Director Rissler's first question. As submitted, one of the requirements for being appointed to the board is to be a qualified elector of the city. So if the board does desire to appoint utility customers that reside outside the city limits, that language would need to be changed.
And so, Director Ressler, if you'll look at, and I thank you, Jay, 98-901, in the middle of that, the utility commissioner shall be a qualified elector of the city with a minimum of 1 year, for a minimum of 1 year. So if that's something that this board wishes to change, we would need a motion at some point to modify that. Thank you, Jay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Mindy.
the next statement also then says, and customers of the municipal utilities. So does that need to be clarified as well, since we've established that there may be citizens within the city that don't have all of the utilities? Are we saying all utilities?
I would let Jay do that interpretation, but it says customers of the municipal utilities. If we interpret that as being all four, then yes.
Yes, okay.
Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to place ordinance 22-23 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Carroll, Sappington,
Yes.
Miley,
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Pardon me 1 second, I got off that page. Ordinance number 22-23, an ordinance establishing the Siloam Springs Utility Commission.
Thank you. So next is our staff reports, and Philip, looks like this is all yours. First is our June financials, the second quarter financial summary, and the administrator's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few years ago, the state changed the reporting requirements for financials and started requiring monthly financials, and we've been providing those monthly financials to you, and I would like to start providing a summary for the board and the public on a quarterly basis, and this is the first of those, the first time that we've provided those summaries since we went to requiring to be provided you with monthly financials. But as of the end of June, the second quarter of 2022, our general fund revenues are up about 6.3% overall compared to the same time frame last year, mainly due to increase in sales taxes. Expenses have increased over that same time period by approximately 4%. We have a number of capital projects that haven't incurred expenses yet. The outdoor warning system, which is in the budget, boardroom upgrades, which is currently in the budget, skate park renovations for parks, phase 1 on the 412 median, and those items are in the process of getting ready to go out to bid and hopefully come back before the board for approval. On the street fund, the revenue is up about 9% compared to the same time frame last year, again mainly due to tax receipts and also some grant funds, and expenses are up by about $400,000 compared to last year. But we're all within budget on operating expenses and capital purchases in the street department. The utility funds are up just under 5% compared to sales as of June 2021, and the service extensions fees are up almost $300,000 because of the growth that we've had. Our expenses have increased in the utilities by almost 6% over this time period last year. Most of that is within budget, but it's due to personnel cost and some depreciation costs. And then the airport fund, our revenue in the airport is higher due to both increased fuel sales and grants for the airport improvements, and expenses are at 57% of budget for fuel purchases, and we're up $165,000 in fuel sales. We are also, in our healthcare revenue and expense, we're at least under budget with a net income, positive income on year-to-date of $54,000. They're looking at 2023, there are some concerns that we have based on the high cost of utility inventory that you've seen in those reports. And again today, I'm not ready to report those, but we are likely in 2023 to have to dip into reserves to cover some of that cost because of the high cost of inventory in the utility. I asked Christina to do some research on the electric side. We have transformers on average are up about 193% compared to what we had been paying for them, but in some cases they're up over 500%. When we ran all the numbers, the average increase in inventory costs for the electric is about 88%. So we are seeing higher numbers on the electrical side. This report doesn't do that. It just reports where we are to date. This is inventory. It doesn't get pulled out to expense until we put that inventory into some project. Unless there are questions, I will proceed on to my administrator's report.
Directors?
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
had a real quick question.
Marla?
On the several large capital projects, were any of those going to be funded with any designated funds that we already have?
The designated funds that we already have. So,
Like the 412 median, I know for the.
so all of those are likely to be, I think, general fund money.
Okay.
They're all budgeted in the 2022 budget.
Anyone else? Thank you. Philip?
So for expenditures for this month, or for this reporting period rather, $31,760 for 8,000 gallons of Jet A fuel for the airport, $32,881.20 for asphalt for the Villa View Sycamore Heights to State Line project as we rebuild that section of Villa View, $32,500 for clearing in Section 6 of the electric grid, which is up and down around Highway 16, so that's the right-of-way clearing, tree clearing for our right-of-way. Also in the electric department, $39,600 for some additional software for GIS mapping for the electric and the annual maintenance and software installation fee. That was funded via 3/8 capital funding as part of that, and that was a budgeted item. And then $35,276 for wooden poles for inventory, and $40,560 for 8,000 feet of secondary wire in the electric department for inventory. And then as it relates to the larger expenses for inventory as it relates to Resolution 6121, $98,380 in the electric for 10 250 kVA single-phase pad mount transformers. Those are for inventory, and then the same thing for 5 pad-mounted switchgear for inventory, $96,630. And again, that's all of those are items that are subject to supply chain, so we won't see those until 2023, we hope. So that's again, trying to get as much of that supply in as we can. I had, sitting here earlier thinking about a couple of other items that I should have put on here. One was at least a discussion about broadband. So we had the workshop tonight based on some of the commentary. I think you might want staff to maybe start thinking about doing an RFI and seeing if there's a partner out there. Is that generally what I took away from that discussion? I see head nods.
I believe that is correct. That's what I heard from most of them, yes.
It is something that I think at some point, depending on how far down the road we go, we are going to have to look at potentially some additional staff to manage that, because that requires a skill set and time that I'm not sure I have and that we currently have in staff. So I think we can go forward with an RFI and start having some discussions, and then depending on how far we go down that, we may have to have some more discussions about where we are with that particular project. I also wanted to update the board, sitting here tonight thinking about it. There was a discussion presented to the board not too long ago about Coons Addition and sanitary sewer being extended out into that county subdivision, and potentially phase 2 of Country Acres. And the statement was made that there's grant money out there. There is potentially grant money out there. We had a conversation with ANRC, Arkansas Natural Resources Commission. They are applying to the state for over $500 million in money for water, wastewater, and stormwater improvements. They did a survey earlier this year on the needs. There was submitted over $5 billion worth of needs to the state. So they're asking for, you know, a tenth of that, or whatever that percentage is. They don't think that they're going to get $500 million out of the state. They hope to get half of that. If they get 500, their goal was to put 300 aside for water projects, 200 million aside for sanitary sewer, and they were asking, I think, for another 50 million. It might have been 550 million, and another 50 million aside for stormwater. So we had conversations, and as you heard at the Arkansas Municipal League, currently within ANRC, there is potential grant money for sewer-type projects if you're a disadvantaged community. And their definition of a disadvantaged community is median household income less than the state. So I can tell you when we were at AML and that was stated, I quickly looked up. We don't have the 2020 census numbers yet, but I looked up 2010. If I remember right, 2010, the median household income in the state was $45,000. The median household income in Siloam Springs was $47,000. In talking to ANRC, they're saying, well, we know the median household income in the state has gone up, so we don't have it yet, so we're gonna push out there and say it's $50,000. So I looked up 2019 census estimated median household income for the city. It was $52,000. So I asked ANRC if we could look at a smaller geographical area, if we could go to the census tract. And they said, yeah, we want to work with you. So if you could go to the census tract and get that, you know, we could look at it that way. The census tract that includes the Coons Addition and part of Country Acres is median household income for 2019, $52,000. I tried to find the census block. So, you know, whole city, census tract, census block. I can't get information out of the census for census block. They don't release median household income because it becomes too personal. So there is a census block that is pretty much just the Coons Addition, but we can't get that number. So the only other way, according to ANRC, to try to determine if we could say it's a disadvantaged community would do a salary survey, going door to door, hiring some, you know, survey company to go door to door and figure out exactly what that total household income is. I had a conversation with Mr. Barnett about that and suggested that that may be something that he would want to do. That's not to say that there's still not some grant money out there in certain cases. So ANRC sent myself and Steve Gorsuch in the Public Works side their proposal to the state, and part of that proposal to the state is to allow for some grants and some matching grants. And so it could be potentially possible that with an average median household income of greater than $50,000, subject to the state approving ANRC's proposal, there might be an opportunity to get a 50-50 matching grant. But again, you know, it's this weird thing of them saying, well, to get grants, you got to be disadvantaged. But in their proposal, they also talked about a 50-50 grant if you're greater than 50,000 in household income. So I just want to bring you up to date. ANRC hasn't got their final rules yet. There's going to be a webinar after Labor Day that we'll participate in to figure out what those final rules are. I've asked staff to start looking at this draft regulations and start pulling the information together, so if we do go after a grant, that we are ready to go after it. I will tell you that in talking to ANRC, small area, small number of individual lots being benefited by that project, and a pretty high cost. So point-wise, might not get a lot of points for that compared to projects in maybe eastern Arkansas and in the Delta, where there doesn't cost as much and they can get more people on sanitary sewer. However, it's in the Illinois River watershed, and that would get higher points in the environmental side. So I just wanted to bring it up to speed, for you up to speed, that we have looked into that issue. We'll continue to look into that issue, but I can't make you any promises that, there's if they only get $250,000 and they take the same portion of that, 2/5 of that, it's $100,000 for sanitary sewer projects, and there's going to be, millions and millions of dollars applied for, and they'll have to go through a process to rate and prioritize which ones they're going to fund. But we are working to on that end. So that's my report, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Philip. So that brings us to our director's reports. Tonight, Marla, we will start with you, and we will end with you, Brad.
Ha ha ha. This is the first time I've been first. I don't know how to act.
I took her by surprise.
Yay! So, okay. I just want to say tonight's meeting was, I enjoyed it because we had good representation of the community. We had concerned citizens. We had developers here, and we had city staff, and we were able to come to conclusions and have good discussion about some of the problems, and I really appreciate that because it's how it's supposed to operate. It takes everybody. I'm really concerned about us buying so much with this year's budget and not getting it till next year. I know that's supply, but it's scary to me, and I've had the same thing, happen to me.
And we're not writing checks yet. We are contracting to buy them when they are produced. But if we don't do that, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So I appreciate that comment. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know we have to stay on top of things, but sometimes it just gets concerning about stuff. And I just want to make a comment about what the Manna Center is doing right now. Every Friday we have 3 food boxes to give out for families that are on free or reduced, on WIC, SNAP, summer feeding, our kids, every Friday between 11 and 12:30 at the parking lot of the library. And we did, I've got like 300 families signed up, and we did 250 some families last Friday. And so it's an amazing program. It goes until the end of September. You don't fill out any income guidelines or anything, but if your kids are in your household 18 or younger and they have some of those services, it's a wonderful program, and so I just encourage you all to get there. I'd like to see you. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Marla. Lisa?
Madam Mayor. First, I want to say thank you for Tim and Charles and Jeff for coming in and speaking up, and then for David from Ralph Coleman for being here to answer those questions. That's always handy. I want to say thank you to Sheree, because it is hard to get up and ask questions and to speak, and so thank you for doing that. This Saturday June 6th, 9 a.m. is the community prayer at the Chamber of Commerce. They have it the first Saturday of every month at 9 a.m. If anybody wants to attend, it's open to the public. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Lisa. Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Administrator Patterson, I appreciate the handling of the concerns tonight with our citizens that had concerns. I thought that was done very well, and all the things that went into that with our city employees, yourself, I appreciate that, how that was done. And I'm very glad we had some good rain, and sitting on the porch in the evening has been really nice lately. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. Carol?
Madam Mayor, I would have to agree with Director Sappington. This has been a really very good meeting. I think a lot of things were accomplished. I think we had citizens that were taken care of. I appreciate our city administrator and his ability to maybe see more things than we do sometimes when a citizen comes up and needs some help, and offers staff to help them as well. I want to thank the company that, and I should look, it's right here, the broadband report, and I'm looking forward, because it sounded like they would help maybe in the beginning to help with an RFI, which we may need, but I am in favor of doing that, because I think we do need to find an ISP partner. If that's the way the board decides to go. That's not my only, I'm not the only one that makes that decision. I am very thankful for the rain. I am thankful for this community. I am thankful for our board, our staff, our city administrator. There isn't any other place I'd like to live. I think this is the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Mindy?
Well, I echo comments that have been made about the effectiveness of tonight's meeting, not only just the effectiveness, but just the participation. So I appreciated the citizens coming out, the staff being willing to work with them, anybody that got up to speak. Thank you. That is what this is all about. A couple of months ago, after the final public meeting on East Main Street design project, Facebook sort of lit up with comments about this $10 million project that included a roundabout to fix East Main Street. And why are we doing a roundabout? Why would we consider paying $10 million for taxpayer dollars? Some of the comments made were as if it was already a done deal. I think maybe that's what Director Burns was referring to as backdoor information. Because I don't think that is, my understanding is that is not actually factual information. My understanding, well, I don't know where the $10 million, so I'm asking for confirmation. I don't know where the $10 million came from. I do know, again, my understanding, that a roundabout was one of two different design options presented to the public. People were pretty adamant that a roundabout was probably not needed in Siloam, and I don't disagree with that. But I don't recall any plan coming to the board regarding any expenditures of improvements on East Main Street other than the initial design work. Mr. Patterson, can you confirm that for me?
So there were two real phases to date of the East Main project. The first phase was Craft and Toll back in 2019, gathering all the information, surveying work and doing all that, having a number of public input meetings, and coming up with the best way I could describe it would be a sketch design. And in that sketch design, there were options for a roundabout and a realignment of the area referred to as 5 Points. This particular, where we are today, is going from that sketch design to getting to engineering drawings that are more detailed and sufficiently, I think, where we could potentially go out to bid. after the meeting in May, based on all the discussion, staff met with Craft and Toll and said, there's not enough traffic. We all agree there's not enough traffic there to justify a roundabout, so let's do away with that. And we asked them what we asked them early on, and we asked them to include a minimum design that would that wouldn't include at least the issues of any of the beautification pieces of it, right? So that sketch design included pedestrian scale light fixtures. I think it included some street trees, and if I remember right, back in 2019 at the end of it, or whenever it was when we were before this board, we were estimating with everything, undergrounding utilities and everything, about $8 million, but that was based on a very broad brush stroke. So with more engineering design, we can get to better estimates, which is one of the things that Craft and Toll is currently in the process of. But we don't have numbers. We don't have the engineering drawings yet. I expect that within the 30 to 90 days we're going to have those and a better idea of the estimate. Whether or not it goes forward remains to be seen. That'll be a decision by this board, whether it goes forward with the full design, whether it goes forward with the bare minimums. I think that answers your question.
It does, and that was one of my questions as well. It was my understanding that we were going to get sort of the bare bones approach as well, that minimum design plan that wouldn't include the beautification enhancement projects, that would just...
Ask them to do, yes.
Okay, so we have not been given any amount over $8 million as a potential cost. There will not be a roundabout in one of, sounds like at least two options they will present to us, because one will be with enhancements and one will be without, and we will get pricing at that time. And I am assuming that we will also be given some possible funding options at some point before any final decision is made.
I think we hadn't got that far with funding options. We talked about that, I think, in 2019. I don't want to, likely if you decide you want to go forward, we would need to have some discussions about funding, but I haven't considered how to fund it until we see what the numbers look like.
Okay. It is very easy to take information and run with it, and it kind of reminds me of the telephone game that we played as a child. It starts here, and then by the time it ends with the last person, it's a little bit convoluted, maybe not the intended message or the accurate message. And so I do encourage us just to, if something looks suspicious, something you're seeing on social media looks suspicious, it could be that it's not completely accurate. And all of our phone numbers and our email addresses, Mr. Patterson's phone number, email address, it's on the website, and you can contact us anytime. And if we don't know the answer right away, we will get the answer. Sometimes the answer is not going to be what you want to hear, but we will get the answer for you. And then I'm going to end on a shout out to a citizen who, she's my hairdresser. Her name is Sherilyn Ford. She has a style studio right across I think it's called Style Studio, right across the way here. She put out on the What's Up Siloam page the other day that if anybody needed school supplies, she would be happy to go with those families to purchase school supplies. And lo and behold, she is now going to meet with 40 different families. She gave people the opportunity to donate toward that project. She's fully aware that there are other organizations that do that sort of thing, but this was something she wanted to do herself. She's been a single parent before in the past. She wanted to give back, and it was just really, really heartwarming to see not only her heart behind it, but just the way people came in and supported her and donated money toward the cause, and now she has that opportunity to help those 40 families. And I think that's what this community is about. And I just think that's pretty neat. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Mindy. Brad?
Madam Mayor, I support Mindy on her campaign for disinformation. Best of luck. Enjoy that thoroughly. I will just say Siloam has a lot of potential at our fingertips, and it all requires change. And we can increase our sales tax revenue and be a reflection of Northwest Arkansas, which is not a reflection of many places in the United States of America or abroad. We're very fortunate, and all we have to do is accept change and understand what is happening in our area. And it's positive and very exciting. So I got questions of East Main. I am humored. I love roundabouts. I've been shot down on 4 proposals, Sioux England Drive, Hyco. I mean, I could give you a whole list of them. It's okay to have conversation, and it's okay to get shot down. I have no idea what East Main's going to end up like. But I attended the sessions, but I gave no input because that's the process. Be patient with the process. The other thing I was asked about is, as a retired city employee, how do you support employees? And I say, I don't. I don't go out. I'm not an attaboy. I've never been a big hugger. I don't know what to tell you about that. I just have the process. And the process is real simple. It's in our little handout here. We've got it because I think Philip did it for me to keep me in line. But in here, in a section of it, Board of Directors and City Administration cooperation. And it tells us this is what I fall underneath. So as a city employee, I immediately, 2 weeks later, transitioned to a board member, and I had to draw that line up, because you can imagine the amount of firemen that thought I was going to give them a pay raise. So, you know, that's not a reality. So anybody has access to that, and you could read what that relationship looks like. How I support city employees in the budget cycle. Pay raises, number one. Sanitation is one. For years it's a tough one, but it's tough to get people to work at sanitation. They need a pay raise. But if you ask anybody in any department, they all need a pay raise. So pay raise and benefits is our number one thing that we can do as a board. The number 2 thing that I can do is, when we have a budget set and there's an amendment to that budgeted item that does not exceed the budget, I ask 2 questions. Does it provide safety to the employee? And number 2, does it provide a better end product to the user? And that's the citizen. Soccer fields, the mower as an example that came up. These are budgeted items we amended, but it provided a better thing. We just had a safety incident recently at the pond that required us to buy safer mowers. We are within budget. The city administrator is going above and beyond with these quarterly reports to just ensure the public that we are not squandering your money. The budget that this board set, we are on that budget. That is a reality. There is no other way to misconstrue that. And that's how I support city staff. As a city employee, the longer you're here, if you stay at the city for over 20 years, you're going to have 3 city administrators, 3, and in my case, 3 fire chiefs. And let me tell you, the longer you're with the city, the harder it gets. You have to change. I made it through the 3rd one. I wasn't willing to change. I'll just be honest with you. Total disagreement. And I just, and I moved on. And I'm not a disgruntled employee. I'm a happy employee. I endorse the city of Siloam Springs. It's a great place to work. But as a board member, that's how I do it. And then the 3rd one is, at the end of the year, when the city admin, his employment comes up, if I am not happy with the way he is running the city, then that is my time to go, Mr. Patterson, you didn't meet this requirement, and, it's been fun. time to move on down the road or whatever that is. But since I've been on the board, we have approved that. And that is the 3 ways I do that. And so as much as I appreciate other board members, I'm not going to show up for stuff. It's not that I don't like city employees. It's just, you know, they don't like me. But they love you at budget time. And I just encourage us as we come in and all this money that we're talking about, really at the end of the day, when we get into this budget cycle coming up, just remember the greatest thing we can do for a city employee is work on raises and benefits. That's the best I can do for those folks out there. So it's a great place to work. It's a great city to live in. I enjoy it. And I just hope that in the future we understand the opportunity that is here, and it's only here in Northwest Arkansas, and in Siloam Springs we have something very special occurring. And I just, I'm hopeful and optimistic that we're going to do the right thing. And having said that, I would make a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.